He is the owner of Corporate Measures, a leadership training firm in Mountainside, New Jersey. In 2012, he founded Sustainable Freedom Lab, whose mission is to bring people from all sides of the political spectrum together to fight for their personal freedoms. SFL emphasizes the importance of exposing and stopping Agenda 21 for sustainable development and its related initiatives. His organization provides live presentations, user-friendly tools, and sourced information to public officials, local interest groups, and community members. You can see John's website at www.sustainablefreedomlab.org. We thank you so much, John, for coming, and where did he go? Oh, there he is. He's been here all along.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for inviting me. We're going to talk a little about Agenda 21 and sustainable development. And before I want to get started with that, let me just say that Agenda 21 or sustainable development, because you're going to find out that they're actually one and the same. The Affordable Care Act and Common Core are actually married. It's really a marriage. They all start in the very same place. You're going to see where that same place is. But tonight we're going to talk about sustainable development. Now, the things I'm going to talk to you about this evening, people have a tendency to say, well, this is really not good stuff. Who's the bad guy? Who can I blame for this? And you're going to find that very often the people who are implementing exactly what I'm going to show you tonight don't really know anything about it. They're just out there trying to do a job. They work 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and they think they're doing a good turn for the environment or a good turn for the people around them. But they don't really see this. And the reason they don't see it is quite simple. Because what we're going to do is we're going to fly up to about 30,000 feet, and we're going to look down at what's happening. When you run a job, you're kind of just going day to day doing what you have to do. But today we're going to fly up and take a look at this from a different perspective. So I called this presentation, How Sustainable Development and Regionalism Are Transforming Your Community. Now, property rights are critical. We all know this. We talk about property rights. They're in the Constitution twice. They're mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. Most people don't understand why property rights are the foundation of freedom in America, though, and it's really very simple. If you own something, and I can come in and I can alter that, or I can take it away, then you don't really own it. In fact, I can take away anything you have. So if you have a piece of property, I can come in, I can tell you what to do with that piece of property, when you can use it, where you can go, how you get to cut the lawn. Guess who owns it? Who owns the property? Because your freedom isn't there. That's why our founding fathers dwelt so much on this notion that we must have freedom of our property. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Your property is free. It's yours. Nobody can touch that property. It's yours free and clear. And yet across the United States, out here in Priest Lake, Idaho, we have Mike and Chantel Sackett. Their property was infringed upon by the Environmental Protection Agency. We got 1,500 people down in Florida infringed upon by local zoning ordinances through a local agency. And out here in Montana, we got Big Meadows. Tens of thousands of acres of land has now been reduced in value because the federal government engaged with them in a conservation easement. So these people have lost money. These are not isolated cases. This is happening all across the United States, and there are literally thousands of these happening. So what we're going to try to do tonight is take a look at why this is coming about. So to understand it, we have to take a look at the history of a thing called sustainable development. We're going to take a trip back to Vancouver, kind of a drippy, rainy, foggy day in June of 1976. There was a meeting of the United Nations there. Now, most of us never paid any attention to United Nations meetings. This one had a rather interesting document that was signed. And here's what that document said. Land cannot be controlled by individuals and subject to the inefficiencies of the market. Private land is a principal means of accumulation of wealth, and it contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, land, may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. Social justice can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. Now, what I just defined stands against everything that our Constitution has to say. This is not about freedom. This is about defining a relationship between man and property. So this is kind of crazy stuff. This is not what we have in America, and will probably mean nothing except it was signed off on by a guy named William K. Riley, who later became the director of the EPA under George H.W. Bush. 11 years later, the United Nations said we needed a document. We needed some kind of a proposal or a report put together. So a guy named Grove Brundtland worked with a team of people, And they developed this report called Our Common Future. And in it, for the very first time, there's one more, we define sustainable development. So here's where it begins to make its appearance. The word had been used prior to this, but this is where it officially became defined. And in here, in Chapter 2, sustainable development is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Well, how do we know what future generations' needs are? The answer is we don't. So the folks that wrote this document, they had an answer for that. They said, well, look, if we can set up a society in which governments control social equity with society, if we can control the economy and assure that there's economic prosperity, and if we can control the environment and manage that, then we're going to have sustainable development. And what I just gave you was a definition of sustainable development. It's a society in which the social equity, the economic prosperity, and the environmental justice are all controlled by some centralized controlling factor. That's sustainable development. And you thought it was just putting out the garbage, didn't you? You thought it was just making sure I cleaned up, took care of myself, and I made sure that the bottles go in one container and the paper goes in another. But that's not really what it's all about. Well, this crazy idea probably would have gone absolutely nowhere, except that 2 years later, a fellow named Jeb Brugman, who was an activist, was called upon by the United Nations in New York, and they said, look, we don't want to let this thing go. You know, we really like this idea, because what this does is it ties finances, it ties economy to the environment. So back in 1976, we defined the relationship between man and land, and now all of a sudden in 1987, we turn around and we married wealth to the environment. So now all of a sudden these three things are wrapped up in this notion called sustainable development. Can you help us get this off the ground around the world? And Jeff, who was already an activist up in Cambridge, said, yeah, sure, I can do that. So we formed a group called ICLAI. How many people here have heard the name ICLAI? Okay. ICLAI was formed in 1989 for the sole purpose of implementing what you're going to see this evening. It wasn't put together to have a literary meeting on Monday nights. We could all discuss the latest book that we read. It was put together for one reason, to implement what you will see. So Jeff got together with some other folks in what they call non-governmental organizations, ICLAI, Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, World Resources Institute, and they created this thing called Agenda 21. It's a plan of action. It essentially took the ideas from the Vancouver meeting that we talked about, land is too precious to be owned by individuals. It took those ideas, which are then wrapped up in an idea called sustainable development in here, and it created a plan here. Now, if you look at the plan, it doesn't look all that bad. I mean, well, we want to protect the environment, we want to take care of the trees, we want to take care of the rivers and keep them clean. How can you go wrong with that? Well, let me give you an idea. Suppose I walked up to you and I said, I'm going to show you how you can save fuel, your fuel bill this year in your car. Wow, that's great. What are you going to do? I'm going to pass a law that you can't use your car. How's that work? Not too good. So even though it may be a good idea, you can go a little too far with it. So let's take a little bit closer look at Agenda 21. Now we talk about some people say, well, this is a conspiracy and nobody ever heard of this thing. It will be pretty hard to be a conspiracy because this was rolled out in front of the world in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 and 18,000 people showed up. When 18,000 people were there, trust me, it's not a conspiracy. Everybody knows about it. It's on your calendar already for a year. At that meeting, a fellow named Morris Strong was one of the speakers. Actually, he organized that meeting. Morris Strong, by the way, was also one of the authors of this. He was one of the committee members that wrote this book. And he said, prior to the meeting, and this is an important quote, this, by the way, is on that website that we talked about. I think it's right down here at the bottom. You see Sustainable Freedom Lab. Current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, the use of fossil fuels, electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. Remember, everything's about sustainability now. So if something's not sustainable, what do you think you have to do?
Make it sustainable.
You got to get rid of it. If it's not sustainable, we have to get rid of it. So far, these guys, we've got to get rid of it. Well, he also said, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Okay. Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Do you remember I said back here we tie the economy into and wealth into the environment? Certain industrialized nations make too much money, according to this book, and they have to be able to spread that wealth around to other countries. Now, I know I've heard that term, spread that wealth around. I just can't quite remember who it was who said that. I know somebody said that not too long ago. So there's a method to that. Well, basically this goes nowhere, right? This is a UN meeting, right? We had a UN meeting that wrote the Vancouver thing that said you can't own land because it's too precious. We had a Vancouver meeting that wrote this book over here. So a UN meeting that wrote this book over here. We had another UN meeting where it rolled the plan in this book out in this book. So, come on, I mean, how many people in this room have ever attended a United Nations Council meeting? Nobody. So nobody pays attention to this anyway. So we don't really have to worry about any of this stuff. A treaty was presented. Actually, there were several treaties presented at this meeting. But we didn't actually sign this treaty. It was called the Convention on Biological Diversity. And in that, they defined exactly what it was that was not sustainable. Now, when you're trying to take over the whole planet for the sustainable development notion, you have to have a whole big book to list all the stuff that's not sustainable. So here it is, about 1,000 pages of what you can't do. And some of the pages I pulled out of here. Page 730, macadams, streets, highways, they're not sustainable, so we're going to have to let those go into disrepair. Dams are going to have to be broken down. Anybody heard about dams coming down in the United States? The Klamath dams out in Northern California? How about the two dams at the junction of the Lehigh and Delaware River? There's a proposal to take those down. I think it's being fought right now. There's a proposal to take those down. All across the country, dams are coming down because that has to return nature to its natural state. Our legal system doesn't really represent the needs of plants and animals and critters. Private property is unsustainable. Well, we already talked about that, didn't we? The folks that wrote this stuff think it's unsustainable because it's unfair that somebody can have all that property and somebody else doesn't have that property. And we need to return the earth to its natural state. So you can't be cultivating that property. We need it to be returned to the wilds. Consumerism is unsustainable because when you buy stuff, you use up resources to create the stuff you buy. So then he theorized that the more money you make, the more stuff you buy, therefore the more you're damaging the atmosphere and the environment. They also theorized that the more intelligent you are, the more highly educated you are, the more resources you're going to consume. Therefore, more highly educated people consume more resources than less educated people. That's right out of the documents. Therefore, wouldn't it be interesting if we had a common core of education that reduced everybody to a certain... But that'll never happen in America, so we don't really have to worry about that. Family unit is unsustainable because there's too many folks. According to this book, the Earth holds about 1 billion people. That's all we're capable of sustaining. Anybody have an idea how many people there are on Earth right now? 7, yeah, say that? 7, yeah, 7 billion. So 6 billion people are in serious trouble if these guys get their way. But again, these are just United Nations meetings, so we don't really have to worry about it too much. They also, at the United Nations, they propose that all these ideas that were outlined in here, this sustainable development notion, once it goes into effect, this is in a perfect world what the United States will look like about 50 years out. All those red spots that you see up there, there we go. Nobody gets to live there. That's off limits. And the yellow is just about off limits. Those are kind of buffer zones to be sure that nobody gets into all this wildland. This is called the Wildlands Project. So where do we get to live? Look at those little black dots up there. See them? Everybody gets pushed into these high-density, compact regions, urban cities. That's where we're left with. That's what the United States would look like if these folks had their way. So little by little, if this should ever come about, land cannot be controlled by individuals because it contributes to social injustice. Left to their own devices, this is what the United States would look like. But we don't have to worry about it because it was just a UN meeting. Until 1993, a year after that meeting was over. We did not sign any binding treaty in which we agreed to anything that I just showed you. We did sign a treaty. George H.W. Bush did sign a treaty, but it didn't bind us to any of this stuff. It was a there were no frameworks or limits or measures set up in the treaty that he signed. President Clinton changed that in 1993. He set up a council called the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And he did it on the anniversary of the meeting in Rio de Janeiro of this. No coincidence. 1 year later, he formed that President's Council on Sustainable Development. And that council, if you check on the United Nations website, because they reported to the United Nations, is it legal for the United States to be reporting to the United Nations? No. We're not supposed to be doing that. But we did it. Okay, so little things happen. We reported to the United Nations, to this group down here, the UN Commission on Sustainable Development. And here's what we said. The President's Council on Sustainable Development was conceived to formulate recommendations for the implementation of Agenda 21. Okay? So now it's in the United States by executive order. That's how it got here. Well, I checked. I said, things can change. This is just, years ago. This was back in 1993. What if stuff changes over time? So I went on the website of the United Nations. I said, let me see if these guys are still doing the same thing. Commission on Sustainable Development. Well, I uploaded this in April of 2012. The Commission is responsible for reviewing progress in the implementation of Agenda 21 and the Rio Declaration. They're doing exactly the same thing today that they were 10 years ago. The responsibility hasn't changed, and none of this stuff went away. Every single federal agency was involved in the implementation, because when President Clinton set up the President's Council on Sustainable Development, all of the federal agencies were members, but they weren't all of them members. Also, the Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, and the World Resources Institute were also members. Anybody remember what they did? They wrote this. They sat on the committees and wrote this. So try to just watch where this is all going. The same people that wrote that are the same people that sat with your federal agencies. And federal agencies write regulations. And what do those regulations do to you? They govern you. They tell you what you can do and what you can't do. They tell you how many gallons your toilet can flush. They tell you what a school education credit has to look like. All this comes out of federal agencies. They got together and they wrote regulations that govern us today. That's how there was never a House vote, there was never a Senate vote, there was never accepted treaty, but every single word that was in this is now embedded in the United States. Now, if you want to dig a little bit further and say, well, okay, are you sure? I mean, okay, so they had a committee, but that doesn't mean anything. Lots of times people have committees and nothing comes out of those committees. Everybody heard of the Federal Register? The Federal Register is kind of a book that just tells us what the government's doing from day to day. So if you get a copy of that, you can see what's going on. So I did. And I checked online. I didn't get a copy of the Federal Register, but I checked online. And in August 24th, 1998, the EPA's Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program is also a step in implementing Agenda 21, the Global Plan of Action on Sustainable Development. And just so you're not mistaken, you might think, well, this is another sustainable development we're talking about. No, it's signed by the U.S. at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. So this stuff is real. If somebody says that, well, this is a fantasy and you guys are just making this stuff up, no. This is real, it's here, and it's affecting policy decisions in the United States of America. Because this is where all those policy decisions go. It's right in there. But it's not just the Environmental Protection Agency. We took a look at HUD. This is a notice of funding available for a grant in 2010. This is a Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant Program. Now, the very front page, what do we see here? Economic competitiveness, social equity, environmental impact, the same three pillars of sustainable development as you find in Chapter 2 in this book. Well, maybe it's just a coincidence. I mean, those are common terms, right? So, try to be open-minded about these things. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Except if you go to page 58 of this document. This document, by the way, is on my website. It's under HUD. I think you can, if you go on, you'll see federal agencies, EPA, HUD, and you can download all this information for yourself. This is on page 58. These are the mandatory outcomes from the creation of a regional plan for sustainable development. Reduce social and economic disparities. That's our society. Decrease in vehicle miles per capita vehicle miles traveled. Decrease in housing and transportation costs. Increase proportion of low and very low income households. Now, it doesn't say we would like you to be able to do that in turn for taking this grant money. It says, what's that word up there? Mandatory. Mandatory. You don't get a choice about it. But we don't use that anymore. You're quite clever with these little notice of funding available these days. They don't say mandatory any longer. Today, instead, they have a thing called the 6 livability principles. And when you take out a grant from the federal government under the Sustainable Regional Planning Grant, on our Sustainable Regional Planning Grant Program. It is mandatory in every single federal regional sustainable development program that you have the 6 livability principles. And what are the 6 livability principles? Everything we've been talking about up to now. So you will do this in your neighborhood if you take this money. So one lesson, if you walk out of here with nothing else, stay away from grant money. Grant money has strings, and for the most part, it's a single payment against a recurring expense. Common Core, Anastasia, we were just talking about Common Core, so these states got this big fat check in. Do you know most of the states have spent the money already and they haven't even started the programs? How do you think they're going to fund this program? Where's the money going to come from? Taxes. The tax dollars are going to go up to fund all this. The path forward, this is also in the EPA today. Now, what I was just showing you were some documents back from the 90s, and I told you one in 2010. Let's just bounce a little bit forward. You may not realize it. In January of 2012, the Environmental Protection Agency changed the way they make decisions. Now, they have to make a lot of scientific decisions. They have to decide really weighty things like, oh, I don't know, is CO2 a pollutant? Gee, well, I guess we better run a test on that, right? Well, yeah, but we have a different way of running tests now. Here's how we do it. The EPA's path forward realigns the EPA's entire research enterprise around the concept of sustainability. So it's no longer beakers and jars and experiments. It's, well, does this sustainably work? Well, that's a pretty loose, fungible definition of sustainability. Well, maybe it's not the same sustainable development that I've been talking about. You know, maybe it has nothing to do with this crazy UN kind of stuff, right? Well, actually, wrong. This document, if you go down to page number 2, and you can also download this on my website, take a look at it. The EPA recognizes the definition of sustainability as outlined by the Brundtland Commission in 1987. This is called the Brundtland Report on Common Future. Yes, they use the same ones in here. Okay, this is a little too many coincidences to be a coincidence. Too many things will fall together. So how come nobody ever heard of this? How come it's just, why is it people are just dancing on their way and doing sustainable development and everything's good and nobody knows any of this stuff that we're talking about? Public officials think you're nuts and, you know, planners, you know, think you're off the deep end. What's happening here? Well, one of the advisors to the President's Council on Sustainable Development back there in the 90s was a guy named Lawrence, J. Gary Lawrence, very respected guy. And he said in a publication called the Millennium Papers, participating in a United Nations advocated planning process would very likely bring out many who would actively work to defeat any elected official undertaking local Agenda 21. You know what? He's right. if we do this, we would. So he had an idea. And he presented this to President Clinton. He said, we'll call our process something else. Instead of Agenda 21, we'll call it comprehensive planning, growth management, or maybe even smart growth. That sounds good. Wow. And they did. So you will see terms like livable communities, social equity, open spaces, complete streets, healthy communities, consensus, resilient communities, visioning, historic preservation, and on and on and on. Road diets. I love road diets. That's amazing. They all do the same thing. They boot you out of these areas. They make it uncomfortable to live in here. They don't provide services. They don't provide benefits here. They make it expensive to live here, but they put all kinds of small housing up so you can live over here in these compact neighborhoods. That's how we get you into the little dots. Slowly we begin to move out of the rural areas and into the compact areas. Most planning today, that's what it does. It de-emphasizes the rural and emphasizes the urban. By 2012, the Sustainable Development Movement was nationwide, and you couldn't get away from it if you wanted to. Everywhere you turn, everything is sustainable development. It's in the kids' school books in school. It's on the side of trucks when you go by. Waste management is the king of it. Siemens Corporation makes millions of dollars over it. The U.S. Conference of Mayors, National Association of Governors, American Planning Association, and the granddaddy of all, of course, it's not the oldest, but it's the biggest now, is the Partnership for Sustainable Communities. That's essentially running all the sustainable programs in the United States. When you apply for money, it's through ideas and programs that are generated through this President's Partnership on Sustainable Communities. That's kind of become a driving force in the past few years. So how does this stuff get into my local community? Well, sustainable development is not political. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. And by the way, I mean, I've been around long enough. I certainly was through the 60s. In fact, I lived in the South in the 60s, and I saw some awful things happen down there. But I got to tell you, I've never seen America as split and divided and rent as it is today. And this is because politicians do that. They convince liberals that you're so far this way, and conservatives that you're so far this way, you're so far out of the, you guys can't get together. We keep squabbling with each other, and who stays in office year in and year out? We get the dregs marching down to Washington, D.C. The only way we're going to turn this around, folks, is if we start to spread our tent, get a broader tent, bring more people in here, and let us understand. We're on the same side of this battle. Because at the end of the day, when property rights are taken away and you're shoved into that high-density urban dwelling of a 140 square foot apartment in Seattle, Washington that costs $800 a month, and you share your kitchen with seven other people, it's called an A-pod-ment. When that happens, it's going to happen to Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians. It doesn't matter. We all have a risk here. Sustainable development is a plan of action to protect the planet and create social equity that transfers personal wealth. This is how this program is designed. It transfers wealth, it places private property under public control, and it manages who is going to live where and how they're going to live, what the lifestyle is going to look like. And yet that all sounds so great here. All we're trying to do is protect the planet, guys. Page through here. Chapter 26. We just want all kids to have an education. Okay. The same one, a common one. We want everybody in the country to have health care, like maybe affordable care, something like that. Yeah. How do you go about doing that? It enters your community through comprehensive planning, planners, studies, and surveys, visioning meetings that planners have, federal regulations, grants, conservation easements, government-sponsored education projects. I have news for you. Common Core continues to grow the way it's growing right now. Every classroom will be nothing more than a government-sponsored education project, and you better be holding tight to your kids' hands and their heads. Regionalism. Let's take a look at a couple of these ways that it gets into your community. One is surveys. I'm going to talk briefly about them. This is a survey from the Capital Region Sustainability Plan in upstate New York. Governor Cuomo, by the way, Governor Cuomo was one of the people who sat on the President's Council of Sustainable Development back in the early 90s and actually participated in implementing this in the United States. Just as a little aside, you can check that. And you'll see he was one of the committee members. Governor Cuomo wants to take 8 counties in upstate New York with 1 million people in it and roll them into one great big region. What happens to local autonomy when you do that? Don't worry about that. Well, they put out a survey that said, survey result that said, hey, you know what, we checked, and do you know 76% of the people support green infrastructure up here? Wow, that's pretty good. There's 1 million residents up here. Well, gee, guys, how many people did you survey? I mean, 1 million. What, 200,000? How many did you survey to come up with this result that 76% people, well, you know, because when you open up the newspaper and you see that 76% of the people want it, you figure, well, I'm on the outside. I may not want it, but my neighbors all do. I just take a wild guess how many people answered this online survey.
200.
100,000? 50,000?
200.
About 96. That's like 96 people responded to this survey. And yet that set the stage for the entire 1 million people. 96 people answered. We can also word surveys so that you get the response that you want. The American Planning Association, and by the way, the APA has done some phenomenal work over the years. They're old, they're respected, they've got something like 10,000 licensed representatives around the country. They're an estimable force in the United States, and they do good. But they also do some things that are not so good. The American Planning Association likes to brag about a report, a survey they did a while ago, or had done for them, that shows that 79% of the people support community planning. Well, that's pretty good since the American Planning Association is in the community planning business. This is a really good one to have. If I can word a survey and get anything I want out of it, look at the definition of community planning. A process that seeks to engage all members of a community. Now, wait a minute, did we just have 1 million members and we only engage 96? Okay, we'll forget that. But it seeks to engage all members of a community to create more prosperous, convenient, equitable, healthy, attractive places for present and future generations. You know what? When you word the definition of community planning like that, the only wonder is why 100% of the people didn't say yes. If that's what community planning was, I'd be out there doing it too. The trouble is that's not what community planning is. And the first sentence right there is just a clue. All members are not engaged. Regions. Another way that this comes into your local community, sustainable development, is by the formation of regions. We'll take a look at one over in New Jersey called the Highlands region. The Highlands region actually restricts development in 52 different communities for the sake of saving the water. Now, that's a good thing. It's going to save water over there. You kind of want to do that. But when that region was formed, the public officials in those regions that were affected have lost their authority over council decisions. So if the regional council says, you can't build here or you can't do that, then the local public official has no authority to override that. You as a local, you can say, look, I want to put a swimming pool in my backyard, can I do this? I've saved all my life, got my money, and it's in the bank, and I'm all excited about this new swimming pool. Can I put that in the yard? You go to your public official, you go to town and say, we can't help you. You're going to have to go to the council. So your local official lost their authority. Now they did get a little of that back under Christie, I do have to say that. I'm not particularly a Christie lover, but he did get a little bit of it back for them, the authority for local public officials. The problem is they're on a short leash, so what we give, we can take. So they're really not the authority powerhouse that they were at one time. One New Jersey public official said, the Highlands Act has turned us into a colony of northeastern New Jersey. Regions are springing up all across the country like wildfires. Southeast Florida Regional Vision and Blueprint Plan combining 7 counties through the year 2060. That's called 750. It's the Florida 750 program. I'm happy to tell you 2 counties have already dropped out of that. It's not 7 counties anymore. It's down to 5. 2 of them saw exactly what we're saying tonight and said, we're out of here. Northeast Indiana, 7 counties are trying to roll up. Thrive 55, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, 3 different states trying to put together 16 counties. Now, who has rulemaking authority here? What happens if there's a question, and I've got this region that's set up that combines 3 different states? Who makes the decisions over local planning? The region does. The state authority begins to give way to these regions. And of course, right over here in New Jersey, we have together North Jersey with 13 counties. Not 13 anymore. We showed this presentation or another one like it, and one of those dropped out. So, grants are another way that these sustainable development programs get into your local community. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Westchester County, New York, because they took a HUD grant, they took a block grant several years ago, and they were sued by a local civil rights organization. They said, well, wait a minute, you violated the grant agreement. And the way you violated it was, you didn't leave any, you created barriers for discrimination. Now, we didn't find any racial discrimination, there is none, but we think that you created a barrier to that. Therefore, we're going to take you to court. So they took them to court over the HUD agreement. And they lost in court. And the court said, again, you're not guilty of civil rights violations, but you might be somewhere down the road. So they were ordered to build 750 low-income houses, and they lost much of their authority the public officials lost much of their authority to a court-appointed monitor. So at that point, Westchester said, well, wait a minute, most of us are Democrats here. We got a good Democrat in the White House. So why don't we just reach out to HUD and get them to help us? We're all buddies, right? We're all the same team here, so, hey, can you help us with this a little bit? Well, they did reach out, and HUD helped them all right. HUD said that Westchester had to go beyond the provisions in the court settlement, that wasn't enough, that 750 homes was only a start point. In fact, they pulled out an old report that had been done years ago by Rutgers University and threatened, just kind of a veiled threat. We might be talking thousands of homes here that could run over $1 billion, according to the executive officer there. Local income homes need to be placed near above average schools. Landlords couldn't question the source of renters' incomes. In other words, HUD came down on them with both feet. They're still trying to bail out from under the damage that was done because of the money that they took from the federal government. Well, the government was delighted with this. In fact, they said, Ron Sims, who was a deputy secretary at the EPA at the time, said, we're going to pursue similar goals, just what we did to Westchester. We're going to do this across the whole United States because this really works. It really worked for whom? It worked in controlling private property. Because suddenly you had a federal agency now telling local officials what they can do with private property. What happened to our Constitution, where we have property rights mentioned twice and once in the Declaration? Well, federal regulations had to be followed up on exactly what Ron Sims discussed. In 2013, a regulation was passed, was proposed, it hasn't been passed, it's still in the review stage, which will be for a few more weeks yet, called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. And what this does is it allows HUD to go into 1,200 cities across the United States, and in those cities, it will force them to adopt government benchmarks or face legal action. What happened to local autonomy? What happened to property rights? HUD has also retained the right to review all 74,000 census tracts from the 2010 census and go back into all those communities that took HUD money and go back and what I call Westchester. We can now control what you do. We can set up court monitors. We can fine you if you don't do what we tell you to do. Government in control. In the Federal Register, the Environmental Protection Agency right now has one of the biggest grabs of power they ever had. You know that the EPA has control over navigable waterways. You also probably know the navigable waterways are very poorly defined, so they're almost anything the EPA wants them to be. In fact, a friend of ours over in New Jersey has a stream in his backyard. Do you know the EPA got in there and they told him that was a navigable waterway and he had to create a 300-foot buffer zone on either side of that? What happens to your property rights when 300 feet of a stream that runs right down the thing, you can't use it anymore? He went to his lawyer and says, what can I do? He said, nothing. When you sell the property, you better put that in your disclosure statement and it's going to lower the value. This guy just had his property value lowered in a lot. Well, now the EPA wants to have this thing called connectivity. And this connectivity connects all those navigable waterways. So we don't just want to have control over the waterways here and here. We want to have everything, the little trickles of stream that connect the two of them. I'll have to say over that too. One member of the chairman of the subcommittee on environment said, once enacted, the EPA will have unprecedented control over private property rights across the entire United States. What happened to property rights? This is all being done in the name of protecting the planet. An executive order was signed Friday, November 1st. It was called Preparing the United States for the Impacts of Climate Change. We don't even know what the impacts of climate change are. Despite what some people would like us to believe, there's a huge debate over climate change and whether it's having an effect, whether there's even any. There's a scientist down in Australia, Bob Carter, Bob Carter. And he's actually traced the climate and the temperatures back millions of years. And when you look at the chart over millions of years, nothing's happening. There's actually nothing taking place now that hasn't taken place before. All right, I like that too. All right. In this document, it says, and you can find this document on our website, that the president's committee that he forms must have the ability to plan, organize, train, and build. Okay, that's a lot. Train, organize, plan, organize, train, and build, and in order to prevent, protect, and recover from climate change. Okay, yeah. Anything else? Yeah. They have to have the ability to manage property and livelihoods. What's my livelihood? Isn't that my money? Isn't that what I do for a living? We have to have the ability to manage property and livelihoods. Well, now, wait a minute. Hold on. You want to be able to plan, organize, train, and build in order to prevent, protect, and recover from the effects of climate change, which you don't even know what those effects are, or you don't know if they're ever going to happen, or what they'll look like. And to do that, you have to manage property and livelihoods. Yes, that is in an executive order, and my friends, an executive order is the law of the land. You will do what it says, because those laws are passed in federal agencies as directions. They're actually orders. Executive orders are orders to from a boss to their employees working in the federal agencies, and then they create regulations that you have to obey. Well, that's not all. They also have to be able to adjust natural and human systems. This is a massive amount of control over the entire property values of the United States of America, and it's going into effect. It's not that this was just a piece of paper signed a few days ago. President Obama is organizing for action, is already running a crash course in organizing to combat climate change in accordance with the executive order, and that's taking place in the Miami group of the Organizing for Action. This isn't a theory. This is here, it's underway, and folks are rolling it out. And they're learning right now. How can we go to our neighbors in our local community and make this look appealing? Make it look like anybody who talks against this is absolutely balmy, because we're just trying to protect the climate change. And the response to most people who don't understand too much about climate change is, well, what's the worst that can happen? We'll be prepared. If it doesn't happen, no big deal, right? You don't realize what we're giving up in the process. It's like, hey, you want to say have a lower fuel bill? I'll pass a law and you can't use your car anymore. Protect, prevent, all sound, no. This sounds like something great. The White House wants to do that. Gee, that sounds really good. Except it's not the job of the White House to prevent and protect, is it? It's not their job. And not from climate change. Foreign enemies, perhaps, but I think he's doing a good job of that one. Where are the limits? Where does it stop? This regulation is virtually unlimited in scope because there are no definitions in it. There's no boundaries in it. There's no parameters in it. There's no measures within it. It's just completely open. To show you how serious this is, Harvey Rubin was a member of ICLAIM. Remember ICLAIM? After this was written, the United Nations went to this guy, Jeff Rubin, and said, can you start this group to roll this out and make it work? That was ICLAIM. This guy's one of the members of ICLAIM. And he said that individual wants, needs, and desires are to be conformed to the views and dictates of government planners. It's not even planners anymore. It's not even hidden. Of government planners. And the implementation of sustainable development, individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective. Who in the world talks like that, taking a back seat to the collective? I'm going to tell you who talks like that. Anastasia was up here talking about Common Core. Well, let me give you an example out of the Common Core test for using possessive nouns in the 8th grade. One of the questions in there, you have to convert this sentence so that it uses a possessive noun. And it says, individual well-being must come behind the well-being of the nation. That's a sentence that they're supposed to turn and show how they can switch it around and use a possessive noun in there. Individuals must all pay attention to public officials. Individuals must pay attention to public officials. And that's what this man is talking about. When I said at the beginning of this presentation that Common Core, the Affordable Care Act, and Sustainable Development were Agenda 21, did the same thing. When I said they were married, I wasn't kidding. They're married. They're one and the same. This gentleman, by the way, happens to be the clerk of the court in Dade County, Florida. He's a public official. I said before, you can't escape this stuff. It's all over. So you have to head on. You have to understand what it is, and you have to begin to get people in public office that understand what's at stake here. Piece by piece, this is becoming a reality across America. It may take another decade. They projected 50 or 75 years. It's not going to take that long. The federal government is buying up land left and right. The federal government owns over 30% of America today. State governments own over 10% of America. And land trusts through conservation easements are buying up literally tens of millions of acres of property across the country. There won't be rural land left to go to because it's being consumed. And then we're being told where we can't go and what we can do with what we have. That's not America. And that's not the way to save the environment. So are there things that we can do? Happily, yes. This can have a happy ending, I feel like. So, number one is get to know your local officials. In fact, as Anastasia and Jamie said, become one of your local public officials. That's the best way. And keep them informed. Make them your best friend. Sidle up to them, have lunch with them, take out little flyers. Emily had a little orange card here. May I see your card, Miss? Does everybody have one of these?
No.
Okay, I want everybody to have one of these because the talk that I just gave is summarized here. There should be a free one there for everybody to take. I want you to have this so that you can see for yourself just what we're talking about. Share this with your local public officials. Thank you very much. Thank you. The other thing we can do is insist that planning surveys are conducted by independent firms. We've just seen what you can do with a survey. I worked my way through college, and I didn't know how old I am. I actually went to college where you could pay for it when you pay as you go. That would be pretty rough. But when I went to school, I worked for a radio station, and we used to go around asking, what we want to find out how many people were listening to a radio station. So the station manager said, well, what you have to do is just go up and say, hey, my name is John Anthony. I'm from radio station WVPO. What station do you listen to? And I'm going to get WVPO every time. The right way would be to say, well, can you tell me where your station dial is set right now? That's going to give you a better answer. So I could get a survey to say anything I want. So can a planner. Planners, by the way, are sales people. I have a new DVD that's coming out shortly, I guess in about 2 weeks here. And that DVD has a whole thing on sales tricks planners use. It's about 8 different presentations on a DVD, short little fundamental presentations. And one of them is sales tricks. And you have to understand, planners are salespeople. And let me just, a little caveat. They're not bad people. They, for the most part, they don't see any of this stuff. In fact, when I sit down and I show them this, they go, well, I never knew that. Where's this come from? I have no idea. Who's the UN? What do they have to do? What's Agenda 21? They don't know. But they're up to their ears in implementing it, and once they sign that grant, they have to bring livability principles in. Analyze surveys, crisis claims, and assumptions in comprehensive plans. Look at the comprehensive plan. We're working with a group out in California, another group in upstate New York. When the comprehensive plan came out, we started just break it down sentence by sentence. It was full of phony assumptions. It was full of falsehoods. And then once the falsehood is established, then we need to find a solution to the false problem that we're creating. And the solution is, ta-da! Urban dwellings, mixed-use dwellings, compact living, reduced vehicle miles traveled. 6 livability principles. So analyze everything you get. Use the planner's resolution. If you go onto our website, on the home page, and you scroll down to the very bottom of the page, there's a paragraph right in the middle. Oh, there you go. That's it. And on that paragraph, it says the planner's resolution. This is a piece of paper. Jamie has printed out several of them there. So they're all free. Just print them out, or take Jamie's, and use Jamie's ink. She's happy. So this planner's resolution is something we ask public officials to sign, and it simply says, before any planner comes into our community to do planning, they have to inform us of anything they're going to do that might infringe upon our property rights. And if they do infringe upon our rights, we have the right to opt out. Now that sounds simple enough, right? We're just protecting our rights. You watch the brouhaha will stand once you roll that out. That's what we have to do. Read and understand all stipulations in grants. Grants and conservation easements are loaded with little strings in there. And those strings are what take away your rights. When you take grant money, essentially they force communities to do things that you wouldn't do if you never taken a grant. But you do it for the money. You're being bribed. How do you think Common Core got into all these states at one time? The state's legislatures were bribed around Christmas time. Most of them were home. The officials were gone. Nobody knew what was going on. The education department wasn't even there. And all of a sudden they were given, I think it was 60 days, or maybe 90. I could be wrong. I think I'm being generous. I think it was less than that. Let's say it was 90 days. They had to sign this document. And guess what they were going to get if they signed it? The state didn't have to abide by the race to the top requirements. They were all thrown out the window. You don't have to do that anymore. Oh, wow, that's going to save us a ton of money. And we're going to give you a great big fat check for a few $100,000 up to a few $1 million. The legislature said, yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead, we'll do that. No big deal. That's how it got here. And by the way, the standards weren't even written. They were not even written until months after these states had already signed off on it. Nobody knew what they were signing. They all just wanted the money. My God, folks, how many here, raise your hand if you never knew that there's no such thing as free money.
Right.
Yeah, with all those, I don't see, yeah, where are they? Yeah. We learned this when we're this high. And yet a state legislature and a federal government, federal legislature, our governors, they don't know that every single check they get has a string attached to it. At least 99% of them have a string attached. Just say no, and we're going to have to learn to do a really bizarre thing in America, in our local communities. Live on the money we have. Live on what you have. But we can't get that new road in there. Okay, then we'll live with the old one, save the money, and then we'll put the new one in. That's how I do it. I didn't buy a house I can't afford before I have the money. I save it, and then I buy it. I want a car, I save the money, I buy it. What an odd way to do things. When in doubt, avoid grant money. Do not participate in the formation of a region, because by necessity, the formation of a region means that suddenly somebody's going to lose their authority. Because there's going to be button heads at some point between the 10 little communities that form the region and the one guy that speaks for the region. Somewhere they're going to butt heads. And if you've got 3 states, it's even worse. If you've got 2 or 3 million people, it's even worse. Now you've got a small council of people making decisions for dozens of people and dozens of communities. It's the fastest way to give up local rule. Local rule is what protects your property right. It sure isn't the government. Has the government ever come into you and said, listen, I want to help you protect your rights and make sure you do everything that's yours and you keep being yours? I want to protect that for you. No, I've never seen that happen. But I've seen them come in and declare that you got a wetland in your backyard, and this is what you can't, where you can't plant a shrub. If there's a clock in the deal, slow down. One favorite trick that planners use to get these programs through is they tell you, we have to do this now.
There's a school
What?
bus.
What's going to happen if we don't do it now? No. You don't have to do it now. And just like a con man who's trying to pull a fast one, you got to buy this today. Back up. I learned something a long time ago. Once in a lifetime deals, they come along once every 90 days. And it's the same way with this. You're going to find a better program or more knowledge if you'll just back up and take your time to look into this and find out what's going on. But if there's a clock in the deal, slow it down. Form community committees to stay informed. I love what I see in here tonight. I mean, the thing that, is this your group, Jane? Is this your, God bless you. I mean, what you have done here is absolutely phenomenal. What you want to do is leverage this. You want to have tons of people that you interact with in the community. They may not all show up down here, but people who are educated, maybe use that little flyer, that little thing I just handed out, the little orange palm card. Maybe use that as a conversation piece. Download some stuff off my website, use that as conversation pieces. Every single person in this room, if you got 10 names or 5 names, and you added them to your email list, and then you share them with you have an email. You said you had a nice new a website also. Okay, share them with Jamie. That's your community contact sheet. What do you think Barack Obama does to keep winning these elections? He's got a massive number of people. You have to get a massive number of people. And then when you get your group together, then you talk to some other group. You know what? We're only 50 people in our group, but we have 1,000 names. Okay, how many do you have? Well, we got 800 names. Okay, now we got 1,800 names. Let's multiply that. That's what we have to do. There's power in numbers, so we need to multiply and leverage our skills. Develop your own plans and protect the earth and property rights. You can come up with plans. We're working on a DVD right now. It will be out, Lord willing, January 1st. It'll be out, and it's going to show you how you can actually do that, how you can develop your own plans. We're going to have an ABC, 1, 2, 3, exactly what you can do. So we think this is going to change the whole movement. It's going to give you tools that just simply aren't available. So, in conclusion, communities are in peril because the sustainable development movement seeks to convince us that unless we compromise our rights and we limit our choices, that somehow future generations are going to suffer. Yet this is a false choice. As communities, we can pull together to create our own plans to improve our lives and the environment for now and for the future generations. We do not need the control of national and regional groups and the seductive lure of restrictive grants. Working locally and working together, that is the real choice. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. We've got a few minutes. There's a question.
We have time for questions and answers, so we have a floor mic.
Yeah, put it by you. Sometimes I miss the question. All right, Jamie, you're going to select it. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for coming. We have a local camp that was just approached. We have 200 acres.
Okay.
And we were given a time clock of 30 days for grant money. It also has a stream running through it. And there's been all kinds of discussion and and the board finally put a stop to the rush. I've tried to educate them a little bit about Agenda 21, but I'm dealing with 12 guys that have my husband is the only one that has ever even heard me talk about this. What can he get off of your website specifically? Do you know that they're going after camps?
After anything.
They're going...
Yeah. Now, first of all, let me back off. I don't have all the facts here.
No.
Who's grant money? Who's offering?
I'm not sure what the name is. I tried to get him to come with me tonight, but he's going away for 2 weeks and he couldn't come. So I'm glad we're taping this so he can watch it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, okay, first of all, find out where the money's coming from.
Yeah, but it is a grant.
Mm-hmm.
It's grants, and they say there's only like 2 or 3 available for this area or something like that.
Right, okay. I know. That right away, the antenna would be going up. You got to get it. You got to get it now. You're the last one in line. I think you're doing the right thing. You can go on the website. There's a document I have on it. It's about 7-8 pages long, recognizing Agenda 21 in your community. I would download that document. It's under resources. So check that out. Download it. And if you will give Emily your email, is there an email way to get Emily your email address? I will send you some stuff and literature and things. In fact, if anybody will do that, there's a list here. Put your email on there, I'll get you on this list, and we just kind of ply you with all this free stuff you can take out and use at meetings. So,
Okay, 'cause
there's also a DVD on there, on the website. It's 14 minutes long. It's short. Maybe you can show that at one of your meetings. Set a little it's meant to set a little laptop up like this.
Well, they have a lawyer who's been reading the paperwork,
Okay.
but even he is, he seems a little bit like, when I try to tell Peter, it doesn't matter what your local is doing, your state can, if it's a
Right.
grant, your state can still overrule, or even a federal, even the lawyer doesn't believe that that could happen according to this paperwork.
Well, we've got copies of grants up here.
Yeah.
Go under the EPA, go on the website under federal agencies and click on EPA, and there'll be a series of links to grants. And this HUD, NOFA 2010, it's all in there. The one I just showed you up here. However, let me do, so there's 12 people in your group, is that what you said?
Well, I think there's 12 guys on the board, yes, including the director of the camp.
All right, if we can get those 12 people, here's first line of defense. First line of defense would be this. Try to get people to sit down and watch that little 14-minute video, because that links it all together. If you can get those 12 people together, I'll come there and I'll talk to them. I'll give a little talk. Get those folks together, and let me show what I did here. I have a presentation I do in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, it encapsulates a lot of the stuff in 10 minutes. Also, there's a DVD coming out, like I said, about 2 weeks ago, we should have this one out. That has 8 little 5-minute presentations. Take that down there. So let's keep in touch on this. But the number one thing you got to do is find out where this money's coming from.
Okay.
Find out where the money came from.
Okay.
Can I have somebody else?
Right here.
I just, real quick question on Main Street program.
The Main Street program?
Yeah. Any
Okay.
connection with,
I'm not familiar with the Main Street program. Is that in Quakertown here?
oh, it's all over the country.
Okay.
What is
They're
it?
trying to revitalize Main Street.
Oh, Main Street programs. Plural. I'm sorry, I'm looking for a problem.
Would that be
Yeah,
related
yeah.
to this kind of group
Well, it
housing?
depends, again, on how it's being funded and the extent of it. I'm not a guy who's against all planning. So, I mean, it's just, if that's what, I'm not the guy. I think planning is necessary. I think we have to do this judiciously and find out where's the money coming from, where's this whole thing going, what property rights are going to be affected. So, in just the generic sense of the term Main Street programs, I don't know. It might be good, it might not be good. But today, the way things are going, you have to view everything with suspicion, with a cautious eye, let's say. Maybe suspicion is too harsh for it. Let's view it with a cautious eye. I need more information. Where are you getting the money from for this Main Street program? What are the limitations on this? How far can you go? Then decide whether it's good or bad. And I don't have that information on the one in your community. But many of them do exactly what we're talking about here. Many of them are nothing more than sustainable development entrees. It opens the door, and then they get a bigger grant. That's what you have to watch for some of these Main Street programs. They get the foot in the door with a little $10,000 grant to put up some parking signs, some stop signs and stoplights, and then that gets rolled over into a $200,000 grant, and now you're knee-deep in the thing. That's the problem with Main Street programs. Yes. Yes, sir.
In terms of this hijacking of science with global warming, it just
Yeah.
seems like the whole global warming agenda is related to regulations and fees and taxes and...
You raise a really good point, because it's interesting that, let's assume that global warming is an issue. Let's assume that climate change is an issue and that man's causing it. Why is it that the only solution is more control from the government, less money from us, and more taxes? That's always the answer. You got to pay more. And that's what President Obama is doing right now with his climate change program. He's charging ahead, driving up the cost of energy throughout the United States, tying up coal, tying up our natural resources so that we can't access them, all in the name of climate change. Well, what if you're wrong about this? We've already said that the EPA doesn't even use pure science anymore. They use this crazy, goofy thing called sustainability to come up with their conclusions. So what good is that? We already know that 72 different agencies have measured temperatures in the United States and created climate projections for the future, and now every one of them was wrong. Not some of them were wrong. They were all wrong. So doesn't that mean maybe we have to look at this? But yeah, she raised a really good point. And there's an article that I wrote that I would like you to read. It's on our website. It's called Governments Cash In on CO2. You might want to log at that. If you just put in the search box on my website here, governments cash in on CO2. In there, one of the members that wrote the fourth IPCC report said it's not about the climate, it's about wealth transfer. Quote, de facto, we redistribute the world's wealth, unquote. That's right now. You'll find it on my website. Just Google the news article, governments cash in on CO2. I think you'll like that article. Yes, sir?
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
When you were talking about regionalizing, there's also the regionalizing of the police forces.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah.
And that's a very dangerous trend. They're taking federal money, again, and federal equipment, and combining police forces supposedly to be more efficient. But it'll wind up being a police state.
Yeah. When you take federal money, when you take money from the federal government, then you got to do what the federal government says. It's real simple. They may even not want to do it. They may be nice people. I'll take you next time. And there may be some really good reasons why they have to do that. Small little community, they don't have the cash. I mean, a lot of this stuff makes sense. But why not work it out between you and your neighbor community? That's what we've always done in America. If I have a problem and I don't know the solution, I talk to my next door neighbor, I talk to my family, I talk to my friends, and they help me through that rough time so I can get over it. That's what you have to do with those like limited resources like the police department. Not go to the federal government, who's now, gosh, on a short leash.
Yeah.
So essentially, those police departments will be on a short leash. I promise this gentleman right here. Yeah, you take over then after that, Jamie, I'm sorry. And then I'm sorry, I stepped in and plugged where I shouldn't have.
That's okay. Just use the mic because then the sound system will pick it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a really good segue into something that's going on local. There's two local townships called, there's one East Rockville and one West Rockville. And they formed a regional police department.
Okay.
Called Regional Police.
There you go.
Now East Rockville says we have less crime than you, West Rockville, so we don't think we should pay half. And now there's a big fight going on between both of them.
Right.
And that's just the way this goes, exactly what you said.
Yeah. Well, you're getting into a regional issue here that's dangerous, and it's called tax-based sharing. This is where you take the taxes that you have, and then a portion of those go to other neighborhoods around you. And it all seems just, warm and fuzzy and cozy, when it starts out. But then there's inequities that come up, like the ones that you're defining. Well, wait a minute, you're getting half the money, but you're not creating half the problem, so that's not fair. So all of a sudden, somebody has to step in and decide what to do, and they do. At that point, a higher authority comes in and decides where the money goes, in which case you've lost your money now. And then you just begin to take bigger and bigger shares of it. This is all about incrementalism, guys. It's all about, we start with a little bit. Again, micro-grant. HUD has micro-grants as small as $10,000. And then they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they keep moving forward. What you're seeing, I said, that first meeting was in 1976. What you're seeing is the residue from that meeting in Vancouver in June of '76. That's why we're all sitting in this meeting room today. Who thought it would have anything to do with that? So, yes, the solution to that, you've got to get on the board and decide who gets the money. Don't take money from people who talk to your public officials, so just stay away from the money and learn to solve the problems together. Find some way to share without maybe taking the tax revenue from the local community to begin to do that. But you're right, that's a regional problem. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've studied this a little bit already on my own. I have, most of my friends are not very educated when it comes to politics or what's going on in the government and whatnot. But from what I've studied, just to give the base where I'm coming from, it doesn't seem to me there's much. I mean, it's very helpful to know what we're up against, understanding Agenda 21 and whatnot.
Right.
But is there really any solution beyond? It seems to me just going back to understanding property rights and not passing legislation that violates property rights or individual liberty is the solution. Does it really help to educate people about Agenda 21 when, if that's the solution, why not just educate people about property rights and avoid violation of that, so that we don't come off like conspiracy theorists, which is, I know it's not a conspiracy theory, but it definitely comes off like one.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I don't do this meeting in a lot of different places now. I used to travel over the country and do lots and lots of these meetings. I think the people who need to know about Agenda 21 know about Agenda 21, and I'm glad to share this information with you. I'm glad that you can see that there's a linkage from beginning right up to where we are today, and that's important for you to understand to give yourself confidence. But you're absolutely right. We don't need to paint this whole history. We don't need to talk about Agenda 21. All we need to talk about is sustainability and regionalism, because you just use those words and then define them and show what's going on. This program carries its own volatility, and it can be torn down just based on the damage that it's doing by itself. You don't need to put in anything about Agenda 21. So I don't know that even if we sit down with your officials, I don't know that you have to win all this stuff. There's a DVD, and I keep talking about this, and it's only because I'm passionate about it. I mean, it took me months to put this thing together, and I'm frustrated because it's taken so long to get it out to people, but I hope by next week to have it out. This DVD talks about regionalism, talks about planning, talks about grants, talks about trips planners play, talks about conservation easements, talks about the new executive orders that have come out, so on and so forth. It doesn't mention Agenda 21 anywhere. It's not in there. Because, as you just said, there's no reason to. This thing can collapse of its own weight if people understand what's going on. But if they don't understand what's going on, it just seems like this innocuous, innocent, well, we're taking care of the environment, and what's the worst that can happen? Even if climate change isn't there, like George Clooney said the other day, these people that hate climate change are stupid. And even if we're protecting a problem that's not there, how can you go wrong protecting a problem that's not there? You go wrong by taking people's rights away to protect it. That's how.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. Yes, yeah.
I wanted to say, in the late 80s, I had a copy of the map of the United States, and it was divided into 10 regions.
Those were Nixon did that.
That's right. And the reason behind it is you take away the verbiage in your what is it, of the state, of your
Constitution?
Constitution. And once you take that information out of there, you now have no boundaries, so you now become a region. And it's very scary, but my other question, that was just a statement, but my question is, what about, with all this that you're talking about, and I believe what you're saying, about states' rights? States' rights supersede federal rights.
Supposed to.
Well, doesn't anybody ever think of saying no? And then we're not going to do this, and
You did.
well, I mean, we've done it with Obamacare
Yeah.
in some of the states.
I didn't mean that as a smart aleck remark.
No, yeah.
You thought of saying no. So that means
Yeah.
you need to be a public official, or you need to know people like you who will be public officials. Washington, D.C. is a sewer. You have to figure it out. I've spent some time down there. I've spoken to senators. I've spoken to congressmen. I've tried to enlighten them in certain different areas. And let me tell you, they don't want to hear anything.
No.
They're basically a closed container down there, except for a few enlightened people. The action is all right here. It's on the local level. The committees get to pick who goes into the elections, choose who the future politicians are going to be or can become the future politicians. So you're absolutely right. You've got to do this here. And meanwhile, you got to try to stop the damage. You got to work on both ends. You got to get new people into the system to understand what's going on. You got to take over the Republican Party and change it, because right now they're going straight down. Daniel Hannan was a British member of Parliament. He said, if we ever passed a health care law, you would no longer have a left and a right in America. You just have a left and a further left. Boehner and the Republicans in Washington, D.C. seem to be happy to go along with that. They can't get left far enough so they get reelected. Because with them, it's all about reelection. We've got to take this thing over. I don't think a third party is the answer, because third parties don't win. It's that simple. They don't win. They win so seldom, it's just not worth the risk. What you have to do is go in and take the party that's there and take it over.
Right.
Get in there and redefine what it's going to do. Start talking to people, and then change it, and get more people like whoever your favorite politician is. Get more people like that down there. But that is the answer to it. Working on both ends. Get people, politicians, get new people going into the system, educate the people that are in the system, and get on the planning commissions in your local community. When somebody walks in and starts talking about redoing your master plan, you say, whoa, wait a minute. Based on what? It's a question to go after. Any other questions?
We have time for a couple more, but before we continue, I wanted to ask, what we're talking about is getting involved on the local level, and some of you may not have been here when I mentioned these CCG community connection sheets. If you did not fill out one of these or get one of these as you came in, and if you would fill one out, I'll have somebody pass those around. To get involved at the local level, you're going to need people supporting you. You need to connect with people in your own township, in your own school district, to have an impact. So this doesn't commit you to anything other than just showing an interest in some way, perhaps connecting with people in your own township, in your own school district, to have an impact for Agenda 21, Common Core, Second Amendment rights, whatever your interest might be. You don't have to fill in every space. The more information we have, the easier it is for us to identify, where you are and and connect you to somebody else who might help you out on some particular issue of interest. So if you haven't received one of those, you can raise your hand. And I need somebody to pass these out. Kathy, anybody not get one of these? We'll just leave them on the back table. Also, we have a couple of the forms that John has been talking about, the planner's resolution and the 10 steps. I only have 20 of these, but we can make more. I will pass them around, one to a family if you don't mind. And then when they get to the back there, Kathy, if we need to offer some more, can we do that real quick before we end? But I want to start passing these around. Is this on? There we go. I want to start passing them around so that folks get them. Now, the planner's resolution is something to hand to your town council, borough council.
Bring it up at a meeting. Bring it up at a meeting, and with there's plenty of people around, stack the room with your friends, and then say, you know, I'd like to present this to the council, and I would like to see if they're willing to sign off on this.
Yeah, now, if you're taking a planner's resolution, you want to use it. Let's make sure you know that's something that you would actually use. And then there's 10 steps to, coming down that side is 10 steps, action steps that you can take. So, you know, again, let's make sure you take the action. But if you fill out that community connection sheet, then it won't just have to be you in Trump Howersville or whatever. We'll find 2 or 3 people that will go with you or that will share the load. So that's
Yeah, Jamie, can I jump in and get to what you just said? That what Jamie said is so important. You don't want to go into meetings, especially visioning meetings and planning meetings, single-handedly. You might want to go there by yourself and you just want to learn. You want to get to meet people, and you want to get to meet the public officials and build a relationship. You want to do that. That's important. When you get into a regular planning meeting or a visioning session, or a session where they're reviewing the reports to change the comprehensive plan, you want to have plenty of support going into that. Don't try to do that by yourself. So.
You don't always have to be the person talking. Sometimes folks don't want to get involved because they don't know what to say, they don't know enough about it or whatever, and it makes you feel, uncomfortable. Don't feel like you have to stay out of the process because you're not up to speed, you don't want to talk. Just going and being ears at these council or borough meetings to pick up on some of the phraseology that John Anthony mentioned that you can learn more about on his website, to catch those phrases and then communicate with us, communicate with Citizens for Constitutional Government, and we'll see if we can't get a small group to go in and address it for you. So we just need ears sometimes, just somebody willing to do it. So go ahead.
Are the 10 steps on the website?
The 10 steps are on the website.
We'll get them on there. They're not right now. I'll get them on.
I live in the borough of Hellertown, and as a borough watching all this, it's really worth attending your borough council meetings. We're part of, we were like one of 3 dozen picked for sustainability, and I'm watching all this play out. And just to let you know, they pass ordinances that are deemed passed 2 years from now without any, if they don't have to come up again for a vote, they're deemed passed. And, but there now is flood zoning that's coming through like Northampton County and Hellertown. And I'm wondering, I guess this is just another avenue of control.
Flood zoning, ephemeral waters, rainwater runoff, all of these things are just ways to create control and taxation. That doesn't mean that there isn't some validity in some of this stuff. I'm not saying there isn't. But the solutions have to be something other than simply to take away, the solutions have to be something other than just to take away your property rights or to take away your tax money. And that's the problem. Flooding can be a problem. I mean, I talked to an engineer who travels all over the world, and he looks at water levels and so on and so on. And he said, yeah, we are losing that top layer. It's becoming destroyed, and then that's now getting down into the aquifers underneath that. And so we do have some problems. We need to do something about it. We don't necessarily mean that we have to start seeking to tax everybody as a solution. That's the standard. So again, you've got to be informed about what's going on individually, and then be able to come back with intelligent arguments. There's research out there that will often refute the information that your local officials are coming up with to save you. What we're playing a challenge here locally. Go online and try to do the research to stop that. And we'll try to provide some of that information on the website.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yes, my question is this. You said that in the beginning, you said that Common Core, Agenda 21, and Sustainable Development are intermarried.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about Agenda 21 being implemented in the schools of education, and if it is, at what level? Because,
It's on
okay, yes, and at what level? Is it high school, college, or et cetera? Because if Common Core is dangerous, I have not seen or heard anything about anyone stopping Agenda 21.
Okay. We don't call Agenda 21 Agenda 21. It's called Sustainable Development. And so you won't hear anybody talk at school about Agenda 21, but you will hear about sustainable development. You will talk about green change, green climate, a global climate community. You will hear about all these things. And this was proposed by the United Nations and UNESCO in a program, in a program called Decade for Sustainable Development. Decade for Education on Sustainable Development. And it ran from 2005 until 2015. It's underway right now. And documents and materials are being put together that have been approved by the Department of Education, and they're now down being used in the classroom. But does it say Agenda 21? No, it just talks about protecting the planet. The kids are coming home with all these individual things. Now, again, it's so sticky here because there's nothing wrong with protecting your planet. You know, I believe in recycling. I believe in leaving a better place, you know, when I go for the people who come after me. I think that's an important thing for us all to be good stewards. But I don't think it's a good thing for other people to define what my community looks like because you're worried about future generations. See, we build our own nations. We build our own communities individually. I am the community. You are the community. The government doesn't come in and decide what our community looks like and what we have to do as a community to prepare for climate change down the road. But that's exactly what's happening. That one statement that I gave you, did I tell you that? Yeah, the individual's well-being has to become behind the well-being of the nation. Really? Since when? But that's what climate change teaches. If we're going to protect the climate, then we have to be globally responsible citizens. What the heck is a globally responsible citizen? Aren't we all that anyway? But according to the books our children read, no, they're not. They have to do certain things. And they mean living a diminutive lifestyle of lack and less. It means tamping down those dreams of greatness. If I want to buy a house for $300,000, and right now I only make $22,000 a year, but someday I want to get there, why shouldn't I be able to dream of that? If I want to buy a house for $500,000 or more, why shouldn't I be able to dream and make that happen? That's not what kids talk about today. They don't talk about possibility. They talk about protecting the environment. They talk about living a life of less so that the future generations will have more food. There's better ways to do it.
Right here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I'm also blind.
you spoke about how many people, even in government, aren't pushing this. And, you know, they're well-intentioned, and they think they're helping the environment. They don't even realize what they're really pushing. Can you speak about who the people are that full well know what they're pushing, and are pushing it on purpose, where those people are, and what it is that they're trying to do?
Well, I don't want to get up any names, but I've been in business for 25 years. I train leaders in businesses. I train corporate executives, CEOs, managers, and so on and so forth. And let me just say it this way. It all starts at the top. Okay? It starts at the top. The tone that you set at the top is like a tuning fork, and it travels right down through the organization. So when you say that there's somebody in the IRS that's going after Tea Party groups because they don't particularly like them, didn't start at the IRS. It starts at the top. So if you want to know who's spreading this stuff, start at the top. As far as other senators and congressmen and people throughout, I mean, you know, study them. I'm not going to make a rat's list here of people to look out for. There's good people out there, I will say that understand what's going to go on. Gravitate toward those people that help them gain more influence, become ombudsmen for them to spread good words, and like James, get people in here. Start getting more people in from the bottom. But there's plenty of people out there promoting this and know exactly what it is. And that's what you have to be on guard for. Yeah.
Thank you so much, John. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much.